Should we go trad? All right, all jokes aside, trad archery has always been something very, very interesting to me. As a kid, I got started with an old Bear fiberglass recurve, some random cedar arrows that my dad had around. He'd make me a target cardboard box, took a Sharpie, put a black dot on it, filled it with newspaper and magazines, and that's what I did, and I loved it. So that's kind of always stuck with me, even though I am a compound bow hunter. Probably always will be. But that's always been an interest of mine, and kind of a goal is like, I guess it's a very pure way of doing it, is to be able to take a deer or hog or whatever, with a traditional setup. So about 10 years ago, the bug got in me, then, and I shot with it, hunted a little bit with it, got very frustrated with it. I didn't have that good of a resource, and still don't around me, but there's a ton of information online, and a lot of other good YouTube videos, and a few friends that are actually pretty experienced in the trad world that have helped me and give me some insight, advice on certain things. So that's come back around, and is a reason why I decided to step up from my old Samick Sage, which is probably everybody's starter bow, or they've had one for a while. It's still a great bow. There's guys probably use them for a long time and no issues, but I kind of wanted something a little bit nicer. Did a lot of research. I didn't go crazy and go Black Widow custom setup bow or any of the other bow names. Again, trad wise, like the lingo, I don't have it, so I'm going to say a lot of wrong things in this video. Feel free to correct me. Much appreciated. You can be my teacher. Anyway, doing some research, I wanted something that was tunable, a little bit customizable, because I don't really know what I like yet. I don't have a preference on anything. I just want it basically to draw smooth, not stack so much in the back wall. So there's going to be a few things in the build that I'll talk about that is supposedly going to help me with that. We'll figure out once it gets all put together. But here's what I went with. Hoyt Satori. This is, again, lefty. It's 17-inch riser. And again, I'll talk about the full specs in a minute. It's an ILF setup, so if you're not well-versed in the trad world, and again, I'm not, but what I found is you can buy all different types of limbs as long as it's ILF compatible. Slides right in, and you tune it and you're ready to rock. Also, the riser came with strike pad, and you can build your shelf up and shoot off the shelf. I have always shot off the shelf, and I've always not been very good because my form is not very good, and that's something obviously I've got to work on. But a lot of research and advice is springy rest is kind of a more forgiving setup. I guess if you pluck or whatever else, then it'll help you out a little bit. So a little bit more forgiving. So I've got a springy rest on there. I think right now the spring coil is a 25 pound, but I have a 20 and a 30 pound as well. So a few springs around it to kind of experiment when I get to the tuning portion. So that's the riser. Then for limbs, you can buy the full Hoyt Satori setup with Hoyt's limbs and all that. But after doing some research and looking at the pricing and all that, I think the Hoyt Satori riser limb is maybe, I don't know, somewhere around $950 or whatever. Could be wrong, but it's somewhere in that range. And as I did research and saw other builds that people did and watch YouTube videos and everything else, I kept coming back to a company that makes limbs called Uukha. Again, not sure how you pronounce that. And the limb that sounded pretty cool from a hunting standpoint was a Gobi. So these are the long Uukha Gobis. They're in 50 pounds, which from what I understand, I bought these from RMS Gear in Colorado. They don't make a 50-pound limb. They basically go up to 45, but sometimes they get some in that are heavy, and they have some that were rated basically at 50 pounds. So these limbs on this riser will come out basically to what I was shooting before on the Samick Sage, which was somewhere around 53, 54 pounds. And with a 17-inch riser and a long limb, I guess the limb can do a little bit more work, and it is supposed to draw a bit better. We'll see. So together, this setup is basically a 62-inch bow. My draw length, again, is somewhere around 29. It's a little over 29, so I'll pick up a few pounds on that. So I'm hoping to be somewhere in that same range. Also, something, again, pretty cool about these limbs is the draw cycle is essentially, it's, from what I understand, it's like an S-curve technology or something like that, where it might be a little stiff in the beginning of the cycle, and then it has somewhat of a give or a little bit of a let off, I guess, at a certain point. Kind of hard for me to fully buy into that, but we'll put them on and we'll test it out and see what happens. So that's kind of the setup. I'll take you through the build, we'll do some shooting, and hopefully at some point we'll go on a journey where we will experience taking a whitetail together. So follow along. All right, so the riser is pretty self-explanatory. You don't have to be like super duper expert in putting limbs on these, but the riser comes already with a limb bolt all the way in. It's an even tiller. That's kind of where I'm going to start. We'll talk about tiller in a second, but the limbs have an orientation. This is the top limb, and then, just to show you how easy it is, there's a little, piece here at the bottom that slides into a slot. You line it up with a limb bolt and they pop in. In terms of the string, there is, on each end, there's a loop. There is the small loop right there. And basically the small loop will go on the bottom limb. And then you have a larger loop here, and that slides over the top limb, and you can kind of slide that down. But the bottom smaller loop is supposed to go there. It's kind of one you don't ever, you don't really take off or anything like that. And then later, once I get brace height and all that set, I'll put a limb tip protector on the bottom there to protect that bottom limb. And again, it's, the piece that doesn't ever come out. So that's that. Limbs are on, string is on, and I kind of cheated a little bit. Last night I was doing research on the springy, how to install it. So the springy's on it. It's not tuned. We're going to go through that process in a bit. Hopefully it's an easy one, but anyway, so the bow's together, and now let's string it. All right, so let's string the bow. So let's get our bow press, which this is a bow press, and then I have a bow press down here for compounds, but the bow press for traditional is pretty easy. You can throw it in your pocket, but basically there's two ends. This end has like a little sleeve, which goes on the bottom limb. And then this one has a loop with a little rubber piece to it. And basically your top limb goes through the loop. The rubber piece kind of sits on top, and then you slide it as far forward as you can. You stand in the middle of the bow press string like so, and you pull up and basically slide the string there, and you'll feel it kind of pop into a little groove right here. And you make sure that's done on both sides, and then more or less your bow is strung. So easy as that. The easiest bow press I've ever used. Pretty straightforward. So from here, put that aside. From here we're going to check the brace height on the bow. So got just a bow square. You go to the back of the grip to your brace height, and then measure where the string comes to. So we're about 8 1/4, which is actually not bad. I think, depending on who you talk to, and I mean, Hoyt has specifications, Gobi has specifications for where brace height on certain limbs and all that should be. Kind of general, rule of thumb from what I've seen, again, no expert, is, between 8 and 9 inches of brace height is kind of, where you want to be. So I think 8 1/4, we're a little bit over 8 1/4, is probably a good starting point. And what you do is you kind of shoot, you shoot it at that brace height. Supposedly there's a quiet place on, with a certain limb or bow setup, and you need to shoot it in and all that. But you can, if you want to change your brace height, you put it back in your bow press, and then you can twist the string. You can put twists in, which will basically increase the brace height, or you can take twists out to lower the brace height. So I think, you know, being close to 8 1/4, probably gonna just leave it there. Again, I don't know what I like or what this bow likes, but I think that will be a good starting point. So we don't have to do any of that, but again, if you needed to, just put it back in the bow press. Take, I think it's the bottom limb is what I read. I'm not sure if it matters. And you'd put twist in, take it out to basically move your brace height. So it's all pressed. All right, so I've got the bow in my bow vise, and I've got my bow square on. So essentially what we're gonna do now is set the nocking point. So I've got it, you know, more or less the bow square is on. You just kind of want to make sure it's just kind of resting on your rest here. And that looks about right. So here you've got increments of 1/8 on my bow square, and from what I've read, so I shoot 3 under, and your nocking point you kind of want at around 5/8, 1/2 to around 5/8 is where you would set it, which would be the top here. So I'm just gonna put a little mark there at 5/8 on the bow square, and then we will tie in the nocks and go from there. All right, so we got nocks tied. Basically, I went with 2 nail knots. And the cool thing about those is you get them tied in. And if I need to adjust my nocking point, I can just turn these and it will go up the serving and down the serving if I need to fine tune. So that's set up, you know, I've left a little bit of wiggle room with the arrow on the string or nock on the string. So that's set, and probably tie in some puffies on the strings and go from there. So on the puffies, you know, I'm just basically taking the bow square, wedging it under the string and limb. I saw Aaron Snyder do this, so it must be right. I don't know. And then mark 6 inches in the bottom of the square to basically another 6 inches. So I'm gonna put 2 puffies on each side and tie them in and go from there. All right, so we got string silencers on. These are just cat whiskers. I decided not to do the puffies because I just had some of this material and kind of with a black, it looked cool. So I got 4 tied in, and basically it was, I don't know, basically 6 inches, another 6 inches on the bottom and top. One other thing that I forgot to talk about, but I mentioned earlier that the bow comes from Hoyt with the limb bolts, you know, all the way in. But so you should have an even tiller, but just to check, and I've already checked, but basically you'd take your string square, kind of where the limb meets the riser there, measure it out. I'm on metric, there we go. So we are there about 6 7/8. Do the same thing with the bottom, and 6 7/8. So just do kind of the bottom and the top just to double check everything, because otherwise you'll have I guess a negative, positive tiller. I don't know the terminology, but I want them even, and that's our starting point. So just wanted to add that, and now we can, I think, start to run an arrow. Do it. All right, so I didn't go over the springy rest yet, so let me talk about that real quick. So basically, it is, you have a spring here, if that's focusing, yep, and then that spring is connected to kind of a plunger in the back, and it's got a nut on it that tightens it down. I've got basically the shaft just dead nuts right in the middle. Whenever I look down my string and line it up with my riser bolts, more or less the point and the shaft is running directly down the string. Not sure if that's right, but that compound world, that's, you know, how I would do it. And when you set up the springy rest, there's different tension strings. Springs. This is I think a 25-pound spring. And when you do it, this stretched out coil, so that's what it is, stretched out coil, you kind of want it ending in the middle of your shaft here. And I may have to trim that. I will be putting shrink wrap on it. I've got some of that, just haven't done it yet to quiet it down, because when you draw it, you can definitely hear the arrow kind of going over the metal, and we don't want that in a hunting situation. So that is a springy rest. So I just shot it for the first time through paper, and we're pretty darn close. Very shocked at how easy that was to get pretty close. Like I said, it's maybe a tad stiff, but I'm going to shoot some bare shafts as well, just to kind of confirm. The arrow that I'm running is it's an Easton 5mm Legacy Axis Fred Eichler something. They look really dope. It's a 340 spine. I think these are cut a little over 30 inches. I have a 75 grain brass insert, and I think up front this is 125 point. There on the back I've got 7-inch wraps and the AAE hybrid. I think these are called the Phoenix. They're kind of, let me hide behind it, so it kind of like a feather, but it's not a feather, it's a vane. That's basically the arrow setup, and I was already given like a lot of hints on where I would be, so that's why it's probably so dang close in terms of the arrow. Like I said, I'm probably going to play with the point weight a smidge, and when I say it's tearing stiff, it's like, I mean, not much at all. My son was sitting here and he's like, oh, a bullet hole, and I'm like, it's close. But anyway, that's where it's at. Also, just maybe first impression on these limbs, I cannot believe they're 50 pounds. I'm gonna have to actually double check them. Measured at my draw length, put a weight bow scale on it, but they feel nothing like 50 pounds. There's no stacking whatsoever on the setup at my draw length. Like I said, I'm a little over 29. And also that kind of like draw cycle let off deal, I believe the hype now. So I could sit back there and hold it for a hot minute, which for hunting like this, I'm so excited about this rig, and getting the tear that I got and where I'm at so far, I'm feeling like extremely confident. Now, aiming and hitting consistently, that's all on me. I've got to work on that. But yeah, let's throw some arrows downrange and yeah, just get into it. All right, so about 16 yards or so. Again, I'm not an expert, so you can give me some tips on my form or whatever. But anyway, we've got a mule deer over there. Smoke City. So I will, yeah, it was a good shot. See if we can just show you there. So I've got a mule deer over there, and he's a discolored mule deer. And I've got a piece of blue tape, arrows buried right in the blue tape. So super pumped about that. But yeah, so I'm not anywhere on an expert level or anything like that, but I've got to say this bow has completely changed, I think, how I feel about the traditional side. It's definitely a step up, and you know, by no means is it a, you know, Black Widow, whatever custom, you know, type of situation, but that's going to probably come at some point. But is it a step up from the Samick Sage? 1,000,000%. 1,000,000%. It is such a joy to shoot, easy to draw back, and I'm actually eager to throw it through the chronograph and see what kind of speeds we're getting, because so far of the bows I've shot traditional, I've never seen an arrow fly like that, and it looks like absolute dart. So, you know, I think from a tune standpoint, we're pretty darn close. I'm probably not going to mess with the point weight or anything like that, just how well the arrows are flying. Of course, I'll shoot it obviously a lot more, and can't wait to get out. You know, my buddy Silas is sitting right there. You want to come here for a second? So we, this is my big man right here. He's recently got into bow hunting, and He's got his compound rigged up. We went out yesterday. We didn't have any luck, but we're gonna continue to stay at it. We got a lot of the seasons left ahead of us. So we're in Alabama. Rut doesn't start till like late January. It's a few days after Thanksgiving now, so we will give it a shot. You excited?
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for following along. Hopefully you got something out of it. And I think if anything, hopefully the traditional archery journey will be exciting, something that you'll dig, and maybe you'll give it a try yourself. So anyway, thanks for following along so far. Remember, aim small, miss small.